What's up, guys? We're Jake and James from Inverted Reality, and you're watching Boss Fight on 2ndInvite, the podcast on hard mode. Today, we're talking about one of the biggest topics in modern gaming, virtual reality.
Not only virtual reality, but something called VR chat.
This is not a thing that we're a part of, but this is a buddy of ours.
CaptainCFox.
Yes, who also posts stuff to
He often
2ndInvite.
posts VR stuff on 2ndInvite.
Yeah.
So this is his Fox lady in VR chat.
Avatar, I believe we would call
Avatar would be, yeah, that sounds true. He really loves it. So if you ever want to talk to a guy about VR chat, he's the guy. We're not actually talking about VR chat. We are just talking about VR.
We wanted to get that plug in.
But we had to, we had to do that.
We before the show, we were talking about it a little bit, and we decided that VR chat is similar to just the random chat rooms you used to get in back in the early 2000s.
AIM, MSN, Yahoo.
Yeah. So
But
I guess I can see the appeal
with an in real life avatar. I don't know. It's interesting.
So,
Anyways.
yeah. So we're just gonna talk about: is it a fad? Is it here to stay? Is it sticking around?
Yeah.
But,
So we've got a few. We're gonna take a look at the gaming ones because there's a lot of crap ones out there. He's not looking at you, Google Cardboard
or Samsung
Gear, or whatever the knockoff $30 virtual reality headsets are at Walmart. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about actual gaming.
Virtual reality.
So there are three main competitors that we're gonna take a look at. So we've got HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, and PlayStation VR. Everybody that is in VR knows those names.
Yes.
For the most part. So we're going to start with the Vive. The Vive was kind of the big, like, professional model. This is the one to get if you want the highest quality, best experience ever. And it was announced back in Mobile World Congress in March 2015. It was a partnership with HTC and Valve. The first consumer version launched about a year later in April 2016. At launch, it was $800 with everything you need.
This was a big thing at launch when VR came out.
Huge entry fee.
Everybody was like, wow, it's like super expensive. Plus, you got to have the PC to run it. So if you didn't have a PC already, you're spending $800 to get the VR hardware. Then you're spending at least $1,000 on just the computer as a machine, and then your monitor and
probably
$1,500
to $2,000. So you're looking at least a $2,000 adoption fee for this if you've never played a game on a PC before. So a little bit about the screen. The screens for the Vive and the Rift are the same. They've got a refresh rate, 90 hertz, 110-degree field of view. That's just how far you can see.
Yep.
Field of view. They're both OLED screens because there's two of them. You got one per eye. Each one's got a 1080 by 1200 resolution. When you combine them, it's 2160 by 1200. That'll be important later. One of the differences that we have is that the Vive actually has a camera on the headset.
Yeah.
Forward facing.
it's different than the other two.
Right. And it's what it does is it's looking for moving or static objects in your room. They use it for safety. They use it for immersiveness. If you've ever seen the Vive, we don't have a picture of it, but there's a bunch of little dots on it. Those are actually IR sensors that are used with their base station. So one of the differences is that the Vive doesn't have a camera that looks at you. Rather, it's a thing that looks for sensors.
I think it has 4 base stations, if I am correct.
I believe so.
4 base stations. So instead of a camera looking for points on the headset, it's a headset looking for the IR sensors in space. Yep. So the tracking on it is better than the other two for that reason.
Yeah, exactly. It's got a gyroscope, proximity sensor, G sensor, a bunch of IR stuff all over it. It only requires one USB 2.0 port, which is an interesting requirement. You would think it would need more than that, but a tracking area a lot bigger than the others at 15 by 15 feet. So you got to have a lot of space for this. This is not like you can
make
that a
required amount of space?
That's like the default, like this is what you need to play. So I imagine you can make it work with smaller, but this is kind of the recommended version. The controllers they've got these weird little hand stick things. They've got 24 infrared sensors on each controller that talks to the base station and talks to the other sensors around the room to show where it is. It lasts about 6 hours of charge. The nice thing about the Steam VR tracking system that comes in, it gives you real-time feedback at 360 degrees to the host. Makes sense with all the equipment you have going on.
Yeah.
Right now, the Vive catalog has over 375 games and apps in the library. Some of the games are going to overlap between platforms. Some are not. It's just how they were developed and things like that. Hard to make stuff that works with multiple VR headsets because of the way that they have to interact with each other.
Yep.
So that's the big one. It initially launched at $799. Right now, you can get it, everything you need, $599.
Yeah. If
you want to expand your room more, you can add on to it, I think, for another $200 for more sensors. But yeah, $600 right now is the entry for that. A lot of people that have it right now that are gaming on PC, you see HTC Vive at the center of it. We all kind of thought Oculus Rift was a little bit of a joke. based on how it started. But I mean, most of the things I've seen is Vive, right? I mean, what about you?
Most of the stuff that I watch, the VR stuff that I watch from people like Achievement Hunter and Funhouse and even Markiplier, they're using Vive for the most part. Unless you get to people like Funhouse, when they do VR at their desk, they're playing with the Rift.
Yeah.
Because Vive isn't really set up to be sitting in front of a computer screen playing that way.
Exactly. So when we talk about the Oculus Rift, initially started at $600, and it came with an Xbox One controller instead of their little motion touch things. And they added those touch things. They were $200 for those two controllers later on. Now it's launching at $400 with the controller, so it's a much cheaper option.
Yeah.
It originally was actually part of a Kickstarter back in 2012, and it got successfully funded, raised $2.5 million. And then we didn't really hear about it for a little while. And then Facebook bought Oculus in 2014 for $2 billion.
Facebook's got some money to toss around.
That's insane, especially back in 2014. So they didn't announce the consumer version until May 2015. Then they said that it was going to start shipping in January of the next year, and then it got pushed back to March. And then they started shipping, but then they didn't because of component shortages. They didn't get them until July of 20. It was a huge mess. It was all over the place. It took forever to get there. Like I said, same screen, same resolution. It's got a few more sensors in it, but it also has a camera, what they call a constellation camera, that's looking for your sensors. That's the thing that'll sit like by your TV or by your monitor looking for you. It actually requires two USB 3.0 ports. So that's kind of interesting.
Which almost makes more sense.
It does.
I'd imagine is it a USB port for the camera and one for the headset?
Yeah, that's what I would assume.
Yeah.
So like I said, early units had the Xbox One controllers. Now they all come with the Oculus Touch. What's cool, and I'm not sure if Vive does this or not, I think this might just be Rift, it can track your finger gestures that you're making.
You can do that with Vive, I believe, because you can move your fingers independently.
Okay.
So there's grips on the controller.
Gotcha. What I didn't know is the Oculus Rift actually has over 500 games since it launched.
It's a ton.
It's impressive, and these are things that we didn't know because you just always assumed there was Vive. And then the next one, which is PlayStation VR. I kind of thought Oculus Rift was just the novelty. Not the case. PlayStation VR was definitely seen as the budget entry. $400 plus the cost of the camera, Move controllers. If you already had them, great. If not, $100 extra bucks.
Yep.
So $500.
If you had nothing, starting for PlayStation VR, you would pay $500 for your VR headset with controllers and camera, and $400 for a Pro.
Right.
So you're in $900. So you're in the cost at the time. You're $100 up on the Vive, but you didn't have to have a computer.
Right. So, and so it's because a lot of the idea behind PlayStation VR is we're marketing to people that already have PlayStation 4s.
Yeah.
Because the standard PS4 will run it just fine. Pro just does it slightly better, but there's still like the same experience.
HDR pass-through.
So the OLED screens, it's only 100-degree field of view, and then it's a 1920 by 1080 combined. So a little bit less resolution, less pixels. It's not as big a deal. You're going to see a little bit more aliasing. You're going to see some edges and some things like that. It's not going to be as pretty, but it's also like half the price of the other headsets.
Way easier to get into.
You can hit, they did their rendering modes differently. They had a 90 hertz, 120 hertz, and then a 60 hertz that basically doubles the display with asynchronous reprojection to display at 120 hertz. That helped people hit that 120 target without having to sacrifice frame rate. So it just gives you more options.
Bad frame rate in VR makes you sick.
Right, exactly. So that was one of the things that we saw when they were putting out developer units, and some of the internal notes like leaked, and they said like, this has to be this. There is no like, you don't get to like be below this. If you're not at this, your game will not be published. End of story.
Yeah.
Controllers are the PS Move controllers, uses the lights on the ends of the controllers to track with the PS camera. It's not going to be as accurate as the other ones. That's just how it is.
It is at the bottom of the tracking barrel. Like you do see this a lot. People have to readjust and recalibrate all the time playing PSVR because it's looking for lights. And when you turn, sometimes like it happens with dudes with long hair and ladies that have hair that sometimes cover the light in the back.
Right.
It can't find the light because your hair's over it. So it does have its problems.
Exactly. But it is kind of that budget friendly. So you got the Vive, which is the top of the end, the Rift in the middle. And again, these prices are a bit different now. Right now, they're actually running a sale on PSVR. You could find the whole system for $300.
Yeah.
So they put out a new version that got rid of one of the cables and simplified the HDMI pass-through for 4K stuff. So really cool stuff going on in VR. So
there's also the HTC Vive Pro now, I think what we're talking about.
Yeah, the Vive Pro.
I think the main difference is wireless.
Yeah, it's got a little bit better screens. It's got a little bit more going on. It hasn't been released yet. It's going to be really expensive. Yeah. So
I saw Markiplier using it, and it's cool. Like he just wore a belt and had a pack on him, but he's walking around in his like VR space with no wires attached to the floor,
which is awesome.
Like, that's really cool. Really expensive, but really cool.
Yeah. So it's definitely going to be a cool thing to watch going forward. We were looking to see in terms of sales figures, and it's not super easy to find sales figures. A lot of people don't want this probably published, but I looked at some forecasts, looked at some things, and came up with HTC Vive 2016 and 2017 looks to be right about 1.3 million sold. Oculus Rift 1.1 million, a lot better than I thought they would be.
Right.
The PlayStation VR back in December, PlayStation came out and said they had sold over 2 million units, which is nuts because it hasn't even been out as long as the other ones. The other ones came out in 2016, PSVR. I clearly don't have that in front of me, but some of the forecasts I was reading say that it could be up to 3 million units by now.
Yeah.
And that's incredible.
I think you're seeing just a different kind of audience attachment, right? So your PC gamers have already spent a lot of money on their PCs. So in PC gaming is a little bit cheaper once you've got past the initial cost of it. But the problem is if you want to add that VR unit, you're like, $800. I could buy a VR unit, or I could wait and buy the new graphics card next year.
Right.
Like, do I want a VR unit and sacrifice graphics for a year, or do I buy my new PC upgrades?
Yeah, and it's interesting. PlayStation VR came out October 2016, so it came out about 6 months after these, 5-6 months after these guys. After their first year, they had over 100 games. They've added to that since then. It's a slower development process just because you got to kind of rein it into exactly these system specifications. But you're still looking at, by the end of this year, at least 200 games, which is impressive for a home console. They have AAA titles, they have tick demos, they have all these options. And I think it has really brought virtual reality into the forefront of playing in your living room like a normal person. Like you don't have to spend $2,000 on a PC setup to be able to go play Job Simulator.
Yep.
You have some options here.
Now you have Moss.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You have Moss. Moss is one of the big PlayStation VR titles this year. Just came out. Really interesting. A lot of cool stuff. I think there's a lot of details to unpack there, and we even left out a bunch of stuff because you can really get into the tech stuff and be kind of excited by that. But overall, when you look at what virtual reality's done in the last year and a half, is this a fad, or are we seeing what could be like the future of gaming?
I see the games now, and maybe it's just because it's early in the development cycle, but I see them now, and you don't see Call of Duty putting out a VR mode.
Right.
We saw Resident Evil VR mode. You can play Resident Evil 7 all the way through in VR.
Terrifying.
So 5-hour, 6-hour game you can play through in VR. But I don't know anybody that did that. I heard a couple people did that, but I didn't hear anybody go like, that is the way to play. There's like, it was cool. I played it in VR.
Yeah.
And it's hard right now because it is early, but my initial reaction here is to say it's a fad in the sense of it won't be the way that everyone's playing games. Just because I think it's, unless the sensor technology gets way better and you can do it in a way more confined space, I don't want to come home every day and play God of War in VR. Like, I don't want to be standing up, playing games, swinging arms around. I want to sit down on my couch and play games that way. So I could see it being one of those things that it gets easier to set up, the sensor technology gets better, and I can walk in and have it set up in 10 or 20 minutes as opposed to an hour, where it kind of takes to calibrate stuff. And I can have that there and be like, I want to play in VR tonight. I come home, or like it's my day off, like I want to play in VR. Or it being like, all right, I don't want to play in VR anymore. I'm turn off VR mode, take the helmet off, and just play on my controller. Or turn off VR mode and just sit there with the headset on and play with my controller, which I know some people do.
Oh yeah,
because you can. Like you're just looking at a screen in VR.
Right. I mean, there's some really cool features. I think with PlayStation VR, you've got like this theater mode that you can go and you can play your games on a big screen. And granted, it's not going to be as great a resolution and stuff like that. But there's some really cool experiences you can have with it. I think that's why PSVR has a benefit over Vive and Oculus, because you don't have as much of the setup. It really is like, there's your camera, here's my little wand sticks, I'm gonna do this here. We even did that at the test run that we did back in October 2016 at Best Buy. It was very quick to like analyze where you're at, set up, and then go.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the PlayStation VR has been so successful, because they're giving us games, and they initially started with a lot of tech demos, and they're starting to expand. You think like Farpoint had the really awesome Alien World shooter. But there's been
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And things like Super Hot in VR, like, that looks really cool. It's not very graphically intense, right?
True.
Like, it's a bunch of polygonal figures moving at you. And they're designed that way. It's not because it's a bad game.
Right.
They're designed that way. But it doesn't involve you running around a lot. It involves you, like, moving your head and, like, catching objects and throwing them back and, like, shooting a gun like this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just one of those things. Like, I don't picture that being like, this is the way we're going to play games in 2025. Okay. It's the only option.
Okay. No, that's fair. I mean, I think I agree with you there. It is really phenomenal, the experiences you can have in VR.
Yeah.
I think it's going to develop into one of those things that serious gamers are going to have a version of a VR headset in the next 5 years. I think for the most part, you're not going to see it with your casual gamers. You're not going to see mom and dad going out and getting it for Christmas for a 12-year-old for his first gaming stuff. But I can already see uses for it for me personally, just as games come out and stuff like Skyrim in VR. I've never played Skyrim, so maybe that would be like a really awesome thing to do. Go out there and do that. They had a Doom VR version that was a few hours. It wasn't the same game; it was a different game.
Yeah.
But they had a lot of really cool things with it. So I think it's going to be one of those options that's here to stay. I think as they improve the quality of the headset, as they improve the quality of the games, and they figure out what people want in VR and then make it happen, I think we're going to see that that's going to become a mainstay in our house. I don't think it's going to replace what gaming is now, but I mean, do you think it's going to go the way of 3D and then it's going to come up and then a couple of years going to be gone? Or do you think it has actual staying power to continue to be almost like a necessary accessory for your games?
I think it's one of these things it's going to stick. So it's not going to be like motion controls, right?
Right.
A couple years ago, motion controls was huge. The Wii, we had the 6-axis thing with PlayStation and PlayStation Move. And like, it was fun, but it evolved into, or devolved into you sitting on the couch like, how can I play motion controls with moving as little as possible?
Right.
So I don't think it's going to do that. But I think it's going to stay, and this is going to sound like kind of raunchy, but VR is going to stay because porn got involved. Like there's like the biggest industry in the world got involved with it. And so it's like, it's going to make money that way because someone's going to go out there and buy a headset just for that reason.
Right.
And so like, that's weird. And it's kind of wrong on some levels.
Right.
But that's probably what's going to help VR stay around for longer than motion controls or 3D or any of that stuff.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely think it's got the ability to just be that other mode. And so I think it's really cool the way you can use VR and have like your thing be on the headset with PlayStation VR, and people, you can actually like have people over and do stuff like that. And I know that they do that with some of the other equipment as well. So I think it's cool. I think it's an option that we didn't have before. Now we have it, and you really just can't.
It's really fun.
You can't describe it until you've done it.
Yeah.
And even once you do it, you like, you just have to do it. Like it was unbelievable. And we played like crap games. Like I played like this like wireframe like tank game, and it was unbelievable.
Yeah, I played.
You look down, and it's so hard to describe.
I played Eve Valkyrie because I didn't. Excuse me, I didn't get to see what you saw.
Right.
I saw like a zoomed out version of what you were seeing, but when I got in, and like the best way to describe how immersive it is like I was playing with a regular PlayStation controller, and they put the headset on, and like the game loads up, and I'm in a ship, and I looked down and I saw hands. The first thing I wanted to do was move my actual hands.
Yep.
And then like I started to and realized I'm holding a controller. Those aren't my hands.
Yeah, it's not going to.
And it's just like I can look around, and there's a whole ship around me. It's just like, this is so cool.
Yeah, there's no like bleed around the edges. You're not just seeing like this part. Like your entire vision is what the headset wants you to see. I'm sure it's even better on Vive and Rift. So it's
and I
cool.
did do it wearing my glasses.
Yeah, you did, and they were super comfortable. The headsets. Everyone says the PlayStation VR is kind of like the most comfortable, especially with glasses.
Yeah.
As compared to the other ones, they're not as heavy and stuff like that. But that's what we think about VR. If you guys have thoughts, I know that CaptainCFox, you have some thoughts on VR. VR chat's really cool. I think it's one of those you got to see it in action. It's like, what's the?
Like you got to be part of it. Like you have to be there.
Yeah, being there, I think, is a big benefit to it. But what do you guys think? What do you guys have for VR? Have you done stuff before in VR? Have you gone and tested out stuff? Do you have some at home? Do you think it's a fad? Do you think it's gonna disappear just like 3D TVs did? Let us know in the comments below.
Yes, let us know. Remember, follow us on Twitter at IR Games. Follow 2ndInvite on Twitter at 2ndInvite. Subscribe to this channel. Stay up to date with what everybody's doing. I know Steve Warr just put out a review of Sea of Thieves. recently, or is that live for everyone yet?
Yeah. It's live. It's his impressions from the beta. So be sure that be sure that you check that out before the full game releases next week. It is well worth your time.
It's true. Remember, guys, save your game because the next box could be harder. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.